Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we have Scott Moss. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason. Super glad you reached out. Pumped to be part of this. It seems like an amazing opportunity just to talk about technology I love. So, let's do it.
Now, I feel the same way to have you on the show. It's an absolute honor. You are one of the best teachers out there. You've got so much material on front end masters and other places, and so having the opportunity to learn from a professional educator is always wonderful. So I'm super pumped to learn today. So for those of us who are not familiar with your work, do you want to give us a little bit of a background?
Yeah. So, like Jason said, I do a lot of teaching, a lot of courses on front end masters, a lot of stuff there. And that's just stuff that I do on the side. Full time, though, I'm actually the CEO of a company called Type. We're a headless CMS. And if you don't know what a headless CMS is, because it's such a wacky name, it's such a wacky name. It's basically, a CMS that you can use on pretty much any app that you develop, right? You still can make your own app however you want, whether it's a web app, a mobile app, a server, doesn't really matter. And then you get to use this CMS, through an API to basically facilitate all the content updates for anyone on your team that's technical or non-technical. So that's kind of what we do. Even though I'm the CEO, I pretty much, still write code every single day.
Yeah.
On most of the framework and the foundation and pretty much everything. Before that, I did a lot of consulting in the JavaScript community with things like Angular and React, just travel the world, helping out bigger companies, facilitate their migrations from smaller tech stacks to newer tech stacks and things like that. And yeah, I speak at conferences sometimes, but overall, I just like JavaScript. I like teaching, and I like to see what's next, really.
Yeah. I think that's like what drives me too, right? Is I'm always just like, I was gonna poke at this anyways, right? So I might as well show other people what's going on as I'm tinkering, so that it doesn't feel like I'm just, you know, kind of being self-indulgent and playing around. Like instead, I get to share.
Exactly. And something I tell a lot of people is that like teaching is like a higher level, you know, way of learning, right? Like teaching in itself is such a great way to learn. So if you're going to learn something, why not teach it? Because people are going to benefit from it, but you're also going to benefit greatly just by having to, come up with the right words to explain something so difficult in a way that people can understand it. You're going to learn it pretty quick.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, yeah. So this is going to be a good one too, because this is something that I think you've taught a lot about, which is Next.
Yeah.
So Next.js is all the rage right now. We're hearing its name everywhere. What is Next?
I'm so proud of Next.js and the folks behind it, the Vercel team, because like I've been using Next.js for a while, and I remember like finding it a couple years ago. I'm just like, this framework is so ridiculous. It's so OP, but I swear like no one knows about it, right? Like people at the time were still, they were not looking for anything beyond React, right? Like it was just like, oh, React, and that's good enough. We can kind of, at the time, like that was a feature. It's like, oh, React's like a Vue library. We can add whatever router we want. We can add whatever state management we want. We can do all this stuff. And that was the feature. But then like, as React started developing, people were like, I'm so sick of setting up all this stuff. I'm so sick of figuring out if I want React router or Reach router or some other router out there. And there was this new market for a framework on top of a framework, right? And if you come from the Angular community, it's kind of always been like that. So you're kind of used to it. So when I saw something like Next.js, I was just like, oh wow, this is pretty legit. Very similar to like Gatsby. Gatsby is like a framework on top of a framework. So like I just thought it was pretty amazing. But basically, what Next.js is, you could think of it as like a bunch of opinions baked on top of React, right? So if you ever use something like Rails before, or you use some type of CLI tool like Angular CLI, where there's a bunch of opinions baked in there. Basically, these opinions were developed by a bunch of smart people who decided they were going to go in and make it easier to develop React applications by leveraging conventions inside of a framework. So some of these conventions you'll see will be things like file-based routing,
Right.
or, different things like that, versus the way you would have to do that without this framework is manually set that up with, actually creating a router declaratively and creating those routes and things like that. This framework Next.js kind of alleviates a lot of those things for you, having to set up an API, having to set up routing, having to figure out how you're going to style the components. Everyone knows there's a million ways to style things in React. So Next.js is that at its core. And then it just adds tons of other stuff on top of it, right? Like being able to automatically do what type of rendering mode you want for free. I would imagine a lot of people have never tried to set up a server-side rendering with React vanilla. Like if you've ever done that, like good for you, but most people haven't. And Next.js kind of just gives you that for free.
Yeah, and the server-side rendering, I mean, I remember when I was back at IBM, that was one of the things that we kept talking about, was like, well, how are we going to get the server-side rendering thing set up? And we just never did. We kept trying, and then the experiment would break in some weird way, and we were like, well, let's push that off and we'll deal with it later. And we just never got around to it because there were so many caveats and weird little things that could go wrong. And so having that sort of thing handed to you is really, really nice. I
agree. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out how to turn my notifications off on Big Sur. I just updated the Big Sur last night. I'll turn them off. But, does
it let you do I have to do the alt click on the notification icon in the top right, and that usually shuts them up, but I have yet to really get the hang of notifications in Mac in general.
Okay,
It turned into Siri. Well, okay, I've betrayed you.
Yeah, we'll leave it alone.
Cool. All right. So, hey, what's up, Andre? I see you in the chat. Dom, I saw Jimena subscribed earlier. Thank you very much. It's good to see everybody. Thank you for hanging out. So yeah, Pratik, we're talking about Next. Next is a meta framework on top of React. So, and we're going to look at kind of what that means. So let's go ahead and switch over to the pair programming view so that we can see my screen here. And before we do anything, make sure you go and follow Scott on Twitter. This is going to be a great feed, a great source of information. We already posted this type link, but I'm going to post it again. Make sure you go check that out. And if you're interested in learning from Scott, there is so much great information here on front-end masters that you can learn. And these are like in-depth workshops, right? There's a lot going on. So definitely get in there and check those out. That is a subscription that you won't regret it. It's great information.
Yeah, I actually go back and look at my own courses sometimes and like learn new things.
I think like my favorite part of teaching is that I get to have notes that I can find. I have so many private notes that I'll never see again, but like at least on my blog, I'm like, I know I published this, so it's got to be here, right?
Right.
We have live captioning today. That is being provided by White Coat Captioning. Thank you so much. And that is so that this show can be more accessible to more people. It is available on the homepage of learnwithjason.dev. So if you would like to follow along in text, that's where you'll find that. The captioning is made possible by generous contributions from our sponsors. We've got Netlify, Fauna, Auth0, and Hasura all kicking in to make this show more accessible, which I appreciate very, very much. And today we're talking about Next.js, which is here. Here's the website for it. And Scott, if I want to get started, what should my first step be with the Next site?
Well, most people will tell you, go read the docs, go do all this cool stuff. What I'm going to tell you is just to open up your terminal.
I like that.
And yeah, I just hop right in. I like to jump in and then I let the docs save me. So we'll go from there. But really, Next.js comes with a really awesome tool called Create Next App, which basically is a CLI that does exactly what it says. It allows you to create a next app. So you can use something like npx, and you can say npx create next app. You can give it a name if you want, and it'll basically just install it at that folder. So we can do that, and should be good to go. I think you might have to have like at least Node 8, I believe, to actually get this running. Don't quote me on that, but you definitely want a later version of Node. Don't come out here with Node 1 dot something or 0.12.
0.12,
yeah. Don't come out here with that. Like, just you should be fixed that first. You probably have other problems.
Yeah. One of the things that I love, which if you've never used it before, is NVM. One of the great things about using NVM is that right now you can see I'm on like node version 14, but if I wanted to use 12, I can just write NVM use 12, and it'll switch my node version over to 12. So I'm going to keep it on the latest and greatest. So let's do use 14.
Nice. You'll have to send me that script for your path there. I really like that path.
Oh yeah, this is starship.rs, which is a like Rust-based kind of terminal prompt. I love this thing.
Okay, yeah, that looks amazing.
Yeah, I will, and I have in my dot files. Let's see, somewhere in here. Come on.
I thought it was just me that like stored my dot files in like a gist on GitHub.
Nah, well, I get it. Like the cool thing about this is you get enough questions about this, and then you're like, well, I should just share this.
Right.
But so I have my Starship config is in here somewhere in config Starship. Yeah. So if you want to have a terminal just like mine, you can use that there. Awesome. All right, so I've got a new folder, and let me open this up in VS Code so we can see it.
Boom. Okay, so when you open this up, you're going to see a couple things here.
Give me 1 second. It's being git ignored. I need to init this folder first.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Side effect of my my dot files being at root. Okay.
There we go. All right, so got a couple things going on here. So basically, the Create Next app is going to scaffold out, a Hello World Next.js app, and if you know React, it's going to look pretty familiar. It's just going to be a couple of things that are different. So we're looking at the package.json here. You can see that we have the scripts object, and there's 3 commands, right? We have this dev command that does something called next dev. That just starts your app up in dev mode with a live reload, or I think actually Next.js calls it fast reload or fast refresh, I believe is what they call it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so they have that. That's going to start that up. Build is basically going to actually build and deliver some type of exported version of your app. And that you'll use that for production. You will almost never use that locally unless you just want to test the build. Your CI will most likely do that for you. And then same thing kind of goes for start. You'll probably almost never do that as well, unless, again, you wanted to test it locally. You want to test a build. You want to see how it starts. But most likely your CI or whatever hosting provider you're using are going to run those 2 commands. Will most likely just be running dev for everything.
And now we've only got 3 dependencies here, which is kind of nice. So React and React DOM are going to be every React project, right? You kind of don't have that choice. And then Next. So I'm kind of used to when I set up a React project, I've got like Webpack and Babel and PostCSS and a lot of that stuff. So Next is kind of taking all of that over for us.
Yeah. And so Next, you can think of Next, taking over everything from the build system all the way up to actually giving you components that you can use inside of your own components. So you'll see that we'll have things like access to a router, access to link components, access to all types of things from this Next package. So all of it's handled. You basically, after you run this scaffold, you can go straight into just writing application code. There's literally nothing else you have to do to set this up.
So I start this yarn dev.
Yep. Boom.
And then this is going to open up 3000.
Yep.
So let me get over here and we'll start this. So here we are at localhost 3000 and we've got a basic page. Okay.
Yeah, you get a basic page here. Welcome to Next.js. You got some resources that kind of show you where you can go for further learning and stuff. So what we want to do is we can go inspect the page that actually has this stuff. So as you can see, we're inside the pages directory. And this is where these conventions start to kick in, where it gets really awesome. So the pages folder that's going to be on the root by default is pretty special with Next.js. So what Next.js does is when it sees the pages folder, it's going to take every single file in there that doesn't have an underscore in front of it, and it's going to create a route depending on the name of that file, right? So in the case of the index page of our app that we're seeing on the left, that's going to be whatever the index.js file is rendering, right? So if we go look at pages index.js, we can see that, yeah, it just looks like regular React. I mean, there's really nothing fancy in here, right? It's just regular JS specs. It looks like it's using some type of styles object, which is probably a CSS module, if you've ever heard of those before.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can change and hit save and it'll update, right? So
That's
basic,
and this is
basic
super
stuff.
cool, right? Like the fact that I'm over here and I can just be like, let's try something and see what it looks like. And as soon as I hit save, that was like maybe a half second after I saved, it's live.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because one thing I didn't mention is Next.js is a full stack framework, right? It actually comes with a server, and even when you deploy it, there's actually a server there as well. So I don't know if people are having like a panic attack back from like, I don't know, when did we start doing this? Like 2014. Remember when we actually built like single page applications and we served them ourselves with Node, and we we threw like some reverse proxy in front of it. And then we all wised up and was like, well, what if we just put this on a CDN, right? Like, and that's basically how Netlify came to be.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's not that. So don't worry, that's not actually what's happening here. Yes, we do have a server, but we, as you'll find out, we'll be able to tell Next.js how we want to treat certain pages, what modes we want to render them in, depending on the content that's on those pages and what type of interactions we want.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes.
So, okay. So looking at this, like this all is familiar, right? Like this is React code. And if you're new to React, we just did an episode on this, actually. Let me pull this up. Let's learn React. Oh, wait, my slug creation doesn't work and it adds extra. But so here's a link to that. This was on Tuesday. Ali Spittle was here and taught us how to do the basics of React. So if that's new to you, go check that episode after this and all will be revealed. But so we've got what looks like mostly bog standard HTML here. The difference being like React special stuff like class names, but we already learned about that last week or earlier this week. So then as I'm looking through here, I see, wow, it looks so approachable, right? There's no magic here.
Yeah, there's no magic here, right? It's all there. I would say the only thing that looks different is so you got that head tag there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is where I said that next package, delivers things like a build system all the way up to components. So this next head tag is pretty much like any other head tag that you could find on NPM that allows you to manipulate the head of a certain page, right? So things like the meta tags, SEO stuff, title, description, all that stuff you can manipulate on a page basis, which is great for SEO. So you get things like this in Gatsby as well. Any static site generator pretty much has some tool like this that you can manipulate.
Well, and what's interesting here is Next is actually giving us Next head. If we're using another framework, Gatsby, for example, we're importing React Helmet, which is a different dependency.
Exactly.
And
yes.
so this is kind of nice because now I don't have to go learn that the way that you add a title tag to my React site is that I have to go find a dependency that can do head management. It's all just kind of baked in. So that is, I think, a really nice touch.
Yeah, it's those small things. It's Next.js is really trying to create that complete framework. And as you like build out an app, you'll start to realize that like your dependencies that you normally would install are like, I don't know, sometimes non-existent. I've literally built Next.js apps where I didn't install anything else other than the 3 that came with it, create next app. And like I've been to production with that app. So, you'd be surprised how far you can go without having to install something when the framework like Next.js kind of gives you everything you need out of the box.
Yeah. Nikki in the chat is asking if this head tag, this is server rendered.
Yeah, it is server rendered, so it's perfect for SEO. And we'll get into. So actually, right now, what's actually happening, you might not know it, but this index page is actually being rendered on the server in development mode. And yeah,
so we can point in here and look. I wish this was not a single line.
On one line, yeah. But yeah, this is actually.
But yeah, here we go. Look, there's our title, and this is view source. Keep in mind, I'm not doing this as like a inspect element. So this is what is delivered to the browser, not what was rendered. So we've got our title, and then when we get out in here, we can see somewhere out here. Here's like our divs and our H1. So all this content is here. This isn't rendered by JavaScript. This is delivered to the browser.
Exactly. Yeah. And by default, Next.js is going to do that for every single page. But you do have the option to change that. And we'll kind of get into that. And that's where like, I think Next.js just kind of just shines. Like once you use that, you can't go back to anything else, in my opinion.
Yeah, that is really nice, and it just takes a lot of guesswork out, right? Like I think one of the things that's always stressful about working on any project is when you're not sure whether or not something's going to do what you expect it to do,
Right.
and you never know which thread you're going to tug at that's going to open like a wormhole, and
Yeah.
you're like weeks into this project, you're like, I thought I was just adding like an SEO tag, and now I'm in the guts of the React rendering. So like, what
Yeah.
happened here?
Now I'm messing with fibers. Yeah.
So that is kind of nice. It's good that, you know, this happy path is handled. Like this is something everybody's going to want to do. If you're building a production app, you have to set the title. You have to provide those social tags because that's how the internet works.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
this is a good thing to see.
Yeah. So
And
it's pretty awesome.
so you mentioned before that, like, so if I want to create another page, I just create another page. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Just make a new file here, name it whatever you want, give it a JS, and then just default export, a component there, put hello world,
Okay.
and we should be able to route to it without having to stop the server and, start it again.
Ooh,
Which I think is
interesting.
powerful. Yeah. Because, hot reload is awesome, but, if you ever had to set up a development environment manually, keeping track of like state during like a hot reload can be tough, right? When it's
Yeah.
reloading and reloading modules and the caches and stuff like that. Next.js just does it very well.
And look at that. I didn't have to stop the server. I just created this page and here we are. And also this is something that I think is really interesting. Note that I didn't have to import anything. Like I didn't have to pull in a Next tool and now that we're on React 17, we don't even have to import React anymore. This is like, this feels nice. This is it's a breath of fresh air, right?
Yeah, it's pretty nasty. Like, I don't know. I love Next.js so much. It's just, I feel, I'm a big advocate of building from, an experience, right? I like to think about a developer's experience, a user's experience, and I build backwards from there without trying to sacrifice the experience. Whereas, I think a lot of open source tools are kind of the other way around. They discover some really awesome technology and then they build that out and they try to, stamp a really nice experience on top of it. And it doesn't really work out that way because you have to make sacrifices. Whereas if you start with the experience first, which is what I think the Next.js team did, and then they enabled that experience through technology, like it just leads to a greater product.
Yeah. But so I noticed something here, which is that this is still getting styles from somewhere, even though I'm not including anything. So how does that work?
Yeah. So before I mentioned, you can make a page inside the pages directory and it'll render it unless that page has an underscore in front of it. So you can see that we have a underscore app.js. So if we go there, you can see at the top there, it's importing some global CSS. So
Okay.
Let's talk about this underscore app.js. Basically, you could think of this as like the intro. This is the index of your app, right? So in the case if you were building a React app, you might have that app.js that says, React DOM.render attached to this document ID thing. That's basically what this page is. This is the root of your app. Every page is going to be rendered from here. So if you look at line 3 where it says component, that's actually a page. So in our case, that's going to be the index page or it's going to be the about page, so everything is rendered through there.
So I can do something like, let's say I want to just wrap this whole thing, and then underneath each one, we'll just say like, powered by Boobs.
Yep.
And now every page is going to have that. So we're on the about page and it's here, and then I'm going to go back to the home page, and here it is. So that's a pretty powerful model that we can now just kind of, here's our global styles. And then because it's a React app, I could also do something, I would guess, where I could figure out what page I'm on and then conditionally show things too.
Absolutely. So I've seen a lot of patterns for that. So basically, like depending on what component I'm on, I want to show this layout versus that layout. What a lot of people have done, and I think actually Next.js has a really good example of this in their docs. Basically, you'll attach a property to your component. Maybe you'll call it layout. And you'll set that to a component. And then inside of this page, you'll just wrap your page inside of whatever component.layout is. and each component knows about its own layout, and it kind of just works that way.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool. And so what do we get in page props? Because like here I haven't passed anything to my page props. So does this get like system things?
Yeah. So let's talk about the props. Yeah. So log them out, see what's there. Yeah, I always do that. And this is where I think this is where Next.js really starts to just like, okay, y'all not playing around here. Like this is nice.
Okay, so my about page is empty.
Mm-hmm.
My index page is empty.
Yep.
Okay.
So now we're gonna add some props. So let's head over to you pick a page, index, about, doesn't matter.
See, this one's a little bit. This one's our proof of concept, right? It's got nothing on it. So let's do here.
Perfect. So what we can do is right now we're exporting a component, but we can actually export functions in this page. And this is where it kind of gets magical. So one of the functions we want to export is going to be called Git Static Props. So yeah, let's create that function and export that. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's going to allow us to get some props that are going to be rendered statically for this page. So like, what does that actually mean? Well, remember when Jason looked and showed you the view source and everything was being sent to the browser rendered already? Well, that's the static version of this page. We want some props to be available when that page is being statically generated. So therefore we could conditionally, show different UI elements that depending on these props. So that's what Git Static Props does. The sweet thing about this function is that it doesn't get bundled in with the browser. It actually gets eliminated. Which means you can actually do node things in here. So things that you couldn't do in the browser, you can actually do in this function, like for instance, reading the file system.
So wait, so if I was like, let's do, we'll get FS and then I'll require FS. And then I could say like, what can we read here? Maybe the package JSON. So I'll say package is going to be FS read file sync.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll read, where are we? We have to go up to one more package JSON. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. And then I could console log my package JSON. Then you're saying that's going to get like spit out here.
Yeah. You'll see it in the terminal output. You'll probably get an error because it's not, returning any props because it doesn't like when you don't return any props.
I have my directories are wrong too, but
right. But it did try to do it. It actually executed the code.
This is actually, that in and of itself is really interesting that it just did. Oh, maybe we can just make it an identity and just have it grab itself.
Yeah.
Is that going to work? Nah, it doesn't like that. I don't know what it's doing.
but yeah, it's executing the code. You can see the error message is actually from the file system, and it's pretty impressive. The other thing, which is even more impressive, is that you would think that you would have to encapsulate all the code inside of this function, but actually you can import the file system module at the top, and it's still going to work.
So let's do something that won't break. I'll import path from path, and I can do it like this, even though it's no.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
So then down here, let's console log. We'll just create a path. I'm going to do a path.join of let's see, test directory file.js.
Yeah.
Right. And then this should. There it is.
There it is. Boom.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And so then I could return this. And so it's telling us that we didn't return an object. Yeah. So let's assume that I was gonna, I don't know, let's say that this was somehow useful. We'll call it file path.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna store that path.
Right. So the next thing we want to do is it's complaining because we need to return an object with a props property on it. And whatever that props property is going to be, usually you want to make that an object. And that's going to be passed in as the page props to this page.
Okay. So then that means that up here, I'm going to have access to that.
Yep. You can just destructure and get file path, and it'll be whatever that is.
So here's our page props.
Yep.
And that should mean that now I can do this.
Yes.
And we'll just make it a div so we can put whatever inside of it. And I'm going to do, let's do a P, and we'll drop file path.
Boom.
There it is.
Yeah.
That's pretty slick. I mean, and that's really cool because being able to do node stuff, that means that I could do something like I could send off a query to my database, and
Yeah.
because this gets compiled away, it won't make that query when it like the page loads. It'll already have been done on the server.
Exactly. You know,
Slick.
you basically completely bypass the API layer
Mm-hmm.
and talk directly to the database, right? So you can imagine importing your ORM and your models inside of this page, you know, very Meteor-esque, you know, from 2013, 2014, where
Mm-hmm.
you're just, you know, interacting with the database directly without having to, you know, go outside to the internet, come back around to your own API and get a result. You just go straight to the database, and you don't have to worry about
Yeah.
that code being in the browser.
And so this also will work. So Next has like an export mode, right? Like it'll let us do stat because you mentioned we can deploy to like Netlify or CDN targets.
Yeah.
And does this work with that?
Yeah, this definitely works with that. In the case that we have here, where we just have Git Static Props, absolutely. So if you wanted to do an export, which is a complete static, you know, I don't want anything, any interaction, this is all static. Yes, this totally works with it because the way that
Oh, Scott has frozen. Um, can y'all still see me? Was it my computer? Oh wait, Scott, you're back.
okay, I'm back. Okay, sorry
Yeah,
about
you
that.
had said that if we were doing an export, and then we lost you.
Yeah, so if you're doing an export, basically the way Next.js handles exports and really just building in general, it'll go through all the pages. It'll look for these functions, in this case, get static props, and it's going to execute that function at build time. So in the case of get static props, it doesn't matter what mode you build it, whether
Oh,
it's
that's
an
slick.
exported, whether it's, you know, a hybrid, whether it's, you know, in dev mode, it's always going to run get static props at that time that it's building.
Very, very cool. And so now I saw a question earlier from, I think, Bendy Myers about this app file. So if I wanted to have different layouts, can I create like an underscore layout two or something? Or is it you kind of have to do that logic in app.js?
Yeah, so Next.js doesn't provide some type of convention to actually make a layout. So an underscore layout here would most likely just make a route called underscore layout, and it won't really do anything. So the way that I normally do layouts is I just make another folder sibling to pages called layouts,
Okay.
and the pages themselves know what layout they need to be wrapped around, either by explicitly wrapping that page in the layout or attaching that layout to a property, yeah, like this, and then you can just use the props inside of app.js to like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is the layout that it needs.
And another thing to point out here too to everybody who's watching is like this layout that's being included in app.js, all it does right now, other than the stuff that I've added for proof of concept, is it's just returning the component that's in the page. So these styles would be your globals, but then you could do something if you had a layout like Scott just said, where we would get like, you know, about layout from layouts, like what, you know, whatever.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
And then
you
down
can-
here, we would just wrap it. So instead of, now you have full control over your layouts and there's no indirection because you're not like, where the heck did that extra stuff come from? Well, we know it came from here.
Yeah, so they're pretty explicit about that, and you know, I do like that because sometimes, especially like when you're building a site that is like for instance, if you're building a Next.js app that is, you know, rendering, it's responsible for your entire stack, right? It's entire for the marketing site. It's responsible for the documentation. It's also responsible for the signed in experience, which is an actual app.
Mm-hmm.
Like being able to have that flexibility on a page by page basis is really great because those are like three different scenarios that might have three different build modes and three different
Absolutely.
designs. And you don't want to do something globally to the entire app.
Yeah. I mean, and I think like people get excited about abstractions and then they want to put everything into the abstraction. And so this app.js is an abstraction.
Yes.
But if we don't use it for everything, then it becomes a useful abstraction. If we cram everything into it, then it just becomes a source of confusion.
Yeah,
So I do like that idea of kind of being more deliberate about it. If this is a page and we want a page layout, just import the page layout and wrap it. That's
Yeah.
going to be more understandable in the long term.
Absolutely. Yeah. I normally keep the app.js light and only try to do global things. So like, CSS resets,
Hmm.
different things like that. But I normally try to keep it as light as possible. Another good example would be like if you have providers,
Hmm.
if you're using some type of components that have providers, you got to wrap a global provider somewhere. That's a good place to do it as well. But then again, maybe you don't want all pages to have access to that provider. So you do it on a
Sure.
page by page basis. So it really depends.
Yeah, and depending on how big your app is, right? Like the advice that you always hear is put everything as low in the tree as you can, so that it's
Absolutely.
not, you don't want everything to be global. That's a recipe for sadness. But
Yeah, it really is.
but if you've got a blog and every page on the blog needs a comment provider, then sure, put it in the app or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, no, okay. So I like this. I think this is a really nice workflow. We've got this get static props flow where we can kind of put whatever we want in here. And as you can see, like this one, I just wrote something and it showed up here. So if we wanted to determine something about our pages just by setting them up here, then we
Yep.
could do something like the page props here.
Yes.
That's available. So we could do page
Yep.
props dot layout and make a choice based
Exactly.
on what's going on in here.
Yep. 100%. And I've done that before. So yeah, that's a pretty good way. So the next thing I want to dive into is like how to create. So right now we've been talking about statically named routes. So we have a name called about, we have a name called index, but we can
Hmm.
also do dynamic routes that have parameters in them.
Okay.
Uh, so the way that works is, so let's make a new folder in the pages and maybe let's call it blog or docs or something like that.
Okay. Blog.
Cool. So we
Yeah,
have a
blog's an
blog.
easy one. Let's do that.
Yeah, blog folder. And then inside of here, if you think about a blog, there's usually like a index page for the blog where all the blogs are listed. And
Hmm.
then there's like a page for an individual blog. So if we wanted to make an index page for the blog, we would just put index.js and now the
Right.
route for that would just be /blog, and that's what would get rendered.
Yeah. And so for this one, we'll start with just nothing, right? We'll make it
Right.
as simple as possible. We'll call it blog and dump all of our information out. It's just a regular old function.
Regular blog.
Okay.
Best blog out there.
But so
So
you're
yeah,
right. So then if I was going to write, like I want to write a blog post, I can't, it's not really practical for me to reprogram my layout for each blog
right.
because I want to just write the content. I don't necessarily want to have to come in and put the title in an H1 or apply layouts and stuff like that.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. So what you want to do is you want to make a dynamic page. So what we can do, sibling
Okay.
to index.js, is we can make another page here, and we can say you basically use the array brackets,
Okay.
and in between those brackets, you can put any parameter name that you want. So in the case of a blog, you might put title, you might put slug, you might put something like that, whatever the name of the
Okay.
parameter you want to be, and then the file extension. So slug.js, yeah. And
Okay.
that's going to give you a dynamic route. And basically this route is, hey, we don't really know the value of slug because it's dynamic. So therefore, Next.js is going to require you to tell it what those parameters are, right? So this is where we get into some little more advanced page building.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've ever done any type of static generation, even something like Gatsby, there's basically a couple ways to think about how you generate pages ahead of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you know what all the content you need ahead of time and you can grab it, then therefore you should know all, in this case, all the slugs. So you should be able to tell the framework, here are all the slugs that I want you to generate ahead of time. So go ahead and make
Okay.
those available. If someone navigates to one that's not here, it should be a 404, right?
Okay.
And that's what we're going to do here with Next.js. So we already know about Git Static Props, but there's another one that we have to do when you do these dynamic ones, and that's going to be, God, I'm drawing a blank right now.
Get static. Is it paths?
Git Static Paths. Yeah, there we go. Yes. I don't know why I drew a blank. Yes. So we're going to do Git Static Paths. Thanks, Jason.
Okay.
Yeah. So Git Static Paths is very much like Git Static Props, except for it doesn't return props. It returns paths, right? So basically a path in this case is going to be an object with paths that's going to be an array of objects. And each object in there is going to have a property on it called params. I want to say it's params. It might be singular, but we'll find out. And that's, in this case, it's going to be the value of the parameters that we want to render. So in this case, we have a parameter called slug, right? So what we want to do is we want to put an object here, we put slug, and then we put a value here.
Okay.
Right? And it could be anything. So if we had if we had tons of objects in here, we're basically telling Next.js, we want to render, if we had 3 objects in the paths array, we're telling Next.js, we want to render 3 pages, and each one of them have this slug.
Like this.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we've got our first 3 blog posts.
Yep.
And then how does this, this is just going to create 3 pages?
So halfway there. So what this is going to do, this is going to register to Next.js that these are valid routes. Please do not 404 when you see these slugs come in.
Okay.
These are valid. But now we actually still need to probably, actually supply some content for this page based off the slug. So this is where Git Static Props comes back in. So we'll actually make Git Static Props on this page as well. And the difference now with Git Static Props is there's actually going to be an argument passed in. That's going to be the context object. And on that context object, we should be able to grab the params. And on the params, we're going to get, the slug property, which is going to be the value of whatever the person just routed to.
Okay, so theoretically, then I can do something like this. Yes. And then I'm going to get, if I return my props object, yes. I could, for now, I guess we could just say
yes.
Let's say we're H1 viewing, or we don't need I know how React works. Okay. So we're viewing a slug, and that means that we would destructure that out of our props here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And so to track this, to make sure that I'm understanding it, what we're doing is when we start Next is going to run get static paths. Mm-hmm. Get static paths is going to provide this array of objects with a slug, and then Next is going to say these are the pages that are going to be rendered. So blog / my first blog, blog / my second blog.
Yep.
Then when it goes to the next step, get static props will run, and it will get this slug that we passed in, but the one individually for it. So it's like the first time it runs, it'll run and it'll get my first blog, and then it runs again with the next one, and then again with the next one.
Yes.
At which point we pass in this prop and render a page which will display that prop.
Absolutely. Yep. So, and if you try to navigate in the browser to a slug that's not what we just said, it'll break. It's probably also going to break right now. Yeah. And that's because you have to supply a property inside of Git Static Paths called Fallback.
Okay.
So underneath where you have paths or above paths in that object, you got to add a property called Fallback. And Fallback is one of my favorite features. And basically, we'll set it to false for now. So we'll say Fallback False.
Okay.
And basically what this does is you're telling Next.js, hey, if someone tries to navigate to a slug that I didn't tell you about, Fallback False means 404. They're just going to handle a 404. We don't want them to see anything. But there's 2 other values you could potentially put here. Okay. One is fallback true, which is really awesome. And basically what that does is saying, hey, if someone navigates to a slug that I didn't tell you about inside of Git Static Paths, that's okay. Don't 404. Instead, go to Git Static Props and pass that path in anyway.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. And the reason why that's amazing is because if you deploy it on a compatible platform like Netlify or Vercel, what's going to happen is when someone navigates to a page that you did not previously render ahead of time, that person is going to render it and it's going to be cached for everyone else. It's like an on-demand pre-rendering.
Nice. Right? Yeah.
And that's helpful because let's say you had, 100,000 blog posts and it was on a CMS somewhere that had the slowest server in the world. And, build time was over 3 hours. So instead of pre-rendering 100,000 blog posts, you could pre-render 1 blog post, right? And then when someone navigates to another one, because you posted it on social media a link ago, when they click that link, Next.js is going to render it when they click it, and then it's going to be cached as if it was already pre-built.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's it's like super slick.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because this starts to hint at like a way that we can crack that problem of like having our cake and eating it too. We want to pre-render because pre-rendering it's more stable. We're going to avoid all these issues with like trying to set up our own custom caches or all these kind of foot guns that come in when we're managing our own servers, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But this lets
What
us
I've been
have
trying
the
to, no, go ahead.
but this lets us have that dynamic aspect without reintroducing the foot guns, or at least there are ways that we can do this that don't reintroduce the foot guns, and that's really nice.
Exactly. Yeah. I've been trying to describe it. I haven't really come up with a good term, but like I always try to describe it as like everything is eventually static, right? It doesn't matter how you build your app with Next.js. It doesn't matter what mode you pick. It's eventually static. Like when it gets to the browser, it's going to be static. I don't really care. It doesn't matter what you do with it. It's going to be static. And that's how I like to think about it. Whereas I think before we always had this separation of like, it's either static or it's not static. Like pick which one you want. Now it's like, well, everything is always static. It really just depends on, what you want to do after it loads up. And that's the different mode there. So, but everything is pretty much going to be static here.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, this is so cool. Okay. So
yes.
now
So by having fallback true, one thing you have to watch out for though is inside of your page now, because our example is pretty trivial. We're literally returning something in Git Static Props synchronously, but if Git Static Props was async and it took a minute,
I have an idea. Let's do this. I have let's use the Rick and Morty API.
I can't complain with that. I literally just had someone like convert me to a Morty character, so I'm all about it.
Oh, nice. But so the Rick and Morty API is going to let us do a character lookup, and you can look up characters by number, right? Nice. And so if I look up character 1, we will get back Rick Sanchez, right? So
let's do it. He would be number 1.
Let's do this. I'm going to change my slugs to numbers.
Nice. Yeah, I see where you're going.
And this will let us actually do something with this. So then when we go to get static props,
yep,
I can I make this async? Does that work?
Yeah, you can make it async, absolutely.
Okay,
and you should have access to fetch in here, which I believe Next.js loads up for you globally. So you should just be able to call fetch without any imports.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so now I've got this, and I'm going to do a call to the API, and then we will get the response. Your helpfulness is not helping right now, VS Code.
It always gets in the way,
I love it. I love it when it's being helpful, and then sometimes it's like, no, but really, I want you to read this, and it's like, dude, chill. give me a little breathing room here. So then, if I put in data, I should be able to say like, let's say name in here, and I think we can get an image too. So we'll get the name and the image, and then down here, I'm just gonna do. We'll do a source of image and an alt of name.
I think it'll be data, because I think you're returning it as a prop called data on 18. So either you got to spread over that.
You're right. Yep. Let's just spread. That'll be easier. So I'm gonna spread data in here, and that'll give us all of these at the top. And then I think what should happen is if I come, did I like lose my page here? Localhost.
It's gone.
3000 blog 1. Broke it. Required parameter was not provided as a string in get static paths for slug.
So a required parameter slug was not provided.
It's got to be a string.
Oh, okay. Very, very specific. Very specific.
All right. Okay. I'm not mad at it. I prefer specificity. That's probably for the better.
Yeah. The error messages are nice.
There we go.
Hey.
So now we've got Rick. And so we rendered 1, 2, and 3. So if I go to, let me make this just a little bit bigger so we can see. I'm going to go to 2. Okay, that makes sense. Let's go to 3.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. But now let's try one that we didn't register. So we only went to 3. So let me try, I don't know, 10. Okay.
Right. So you saw that loading, that pop in right there?
Mm-hmm.
That's due, and it worked out well for your example because we're not really doing anything that would actually cause an error inside of our page. We're not doing any like nested property lookups that would error out if something was null. So everything's good there. But if you were doing like, let me get this character dot origin dot name, it would actually break because at the time of the page rendering, the data wasn't actually there. And that's because how fallback works. Fallback is going to render the page first with no props. And then it's going to render it again when the props do come. So it actually renders twice.
And also now, if I go to, I'm just going to assume that there aren't 99,000 characters on Rick and Morty. So now it's broken. We don't have a character.
Exactly. So yeah, the way you get around that is you can actually import the use router hook from Next router, and there is a is fallback Boolean on there that tells you if it's in fallback mode or not. So in your page, you can say, you know, I think it's next/router. Yeah, and then inside of here, you can say const router equals use router.
Okay.
Yeah. And then on the router object, there's a router.is fallback. There it is. Yep. And that's just a Boolean. So if fallback is true, that means it's loading. We're loading right now. Maybe you want to show a loading spinner. Maybe you want to show something else. And then it's going to render it again when it comes back with the actual data.
Okay. So now if we're in the fallback, it's going to say loading and then it'll load. So this one's still going to break, but it shows us loading and then says it's broken. And then if I go to, let's see what 30 is. Loading, and then it shows that was not the right character. Good. Randomness strikes again.
That's my son's favorite character.
All right.
Good.
Moment of silence for that one.
Yeah. Oh man.
Okay.
So that's how fallback works. But some people don't want that loading. They don't want
hoofed up.
Their users to be
so that's exciting.
So what they'll do is they'll change fallback from true to being in a string. They'll put blocking, and that's actually something new to Next.js. Yeah, and basically what this means is, hey, block the initial rendering until Git Static Props actually renders it, and then render it.
Okay, so let's go to 6. We haven't hit that one yet, so it shouldn't be cached. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't show anything until, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That's another way to do that. Yeah, so I think it really just depends on how fast your APIs are. If you can get something fast enough. You don't want them looking at a white screen. It really just depends on how you want to do it. But they give you that option, which is really cool.
Yeah. Well, and there's also like some really, between the options that we have. So we can say like, don't do anything until it's time, which I think that's the recommendation from perf experts I've seen. If your stuff goes on screen, I think it's it's either 500 milliseconds or a second. It feels slower if you see a loading spinner. So if your API is that fast, just block and then show it immediately. But in other cases, then you can use this is fallback to show your skeleton component or a loading spinner.
Exactly. Yes.
And then in cases where like an interesting kind of approach I can see here is if you know what your top pages are, like if you use your Google Analytics data and you know that like these are the 15 posts that get most of the traffic on your blog, pre-render those and then let the rest get rendered lazily, and you get a super fast build and a super fast performance, and you're kind of using data to improve both the developer experience and the user experience. I really, really love that. Yeah,
that's actually a really good idea. I actually helped a big company do the exact same thing inside of their pages. I was just like, they were trying to figure out a strategy on what pages to render. And I was like, well, what's the hottest pages on your analytics? So inside of Git Static Paths, we literally just made a call to the analytics to get the top pages, and we rendered those. And it was a beautiful strategy. So yeah, very, very good idea.
Yeah. This is fun. This is okay. All right. So I'm pretty excited here. I feel like we've got a lot of potential. So we've covered so far at like the file-based routing. So just creating a page. We've got dynamic routing where we're able to create a parameterized page that can do the get static paths.
Yep.
We haven't looked at this folder though. What's up with an API here?
Yeah. So API is pretty magic. So it works as far as conventions go. It works pretty similar to how the pages would work. Whereas in the pages directory, whatever the name of the file is, that's going to be the name of the route. In the API directory, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's going to create an API for you at the route of whatever the name of the file is. So in this case, we're inside of API hello.js. That's going to create a route for us at /API/hello. And as far as like the verb that you can run on it, it's going to run on every verb for now because we haven't specified how we're going to handle it. So that means you can do a GET request to API hello, a post, a put, whatever you want, and it's going to actually run this function that you see here, which is basically a serverless function. You get a request object, you get a response object, you can do whatever you want.
Nice. And so then if I just visit this, I'll just go to what was it, API
/hello. Yeah.
I get back this response, and I'm using Firefox. That's why this stuff is looking so formatted. This is what's actually coming back. And man, so I just switched to Firefox because Chrome was getting so it would beach ball because it was using so much memory. And I'm noticing all these nice little things that Firefox does, like formatting data when you hit a raw JSON endpoint
without a Chrome extension. Yeah.
But yeah, wow, dang, that is really, really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. So you could actually, it really just depends on your, experience with serverless, because me personally, I wouldn't say serverless is, I wouldn't say it's like it's a 1-for-1 replacement for having like a actual traditional API. Because it really just, for me, it really comes down to like, what are you trying to do, right? Like if you are doing anything like, a task that's, it's going to be, it has to be extended, for instance, like a WebSocket, anything that's like polling or something like that, serverless is not built for that. It literally is the anti of anything long-based tasks. So like I wouldn't use serverless for that. And even really depends on your database. Some databases just work well with serverless because databases were created in the idea that they were going to be living on a long-lived connection and they could have pools and things like that. Serverless is the opposite of that. It spins up and it shuts down. It doesn't want to keep track of anything. So you really have to make some good technology changes to really take advantage of serverless. The good news is that most popular databases and frameworks have some type of serverless, counterpart or some type of, tutorial that you can follow that help you get there.
Yeah. Well, and this is really exciting too, because it's like, a lot of times what I found is that as I'm building out some kind of a web app or trying to work toward a goal, I will find that there's one thing I need to do where I have to like hit an API endpoint and then hit another API endpoint, stitch that stuff together and filter it. And it's, it's ultimately just JavaScript, but like I would end up writing these really complex React components that do all this business logic. And it always felt wrong. It was like, this is the wrong place to do this work. But I didn't want to stand up a server to build my own proxy API or whatever.
Right.
And what I like about serverless and what we're seeing come in here is that when we get that heavy business logic, now we're not writing these complicated utils folders that sit in our front end. We're writing kind of encapsulated serverless functions that do that work and are then accessible through the web. So like instead of me having to tell my team like, oh, if you want to use this data, you got to copy this util over to your project. It's now like, oh, that data is available at this endpoint. You can just hit it. And now I'm like suddenly a backend engineer because I built an API for my team. But really, I just had to write some logic to make that happen. Like that to me is really cool, I think.
I think it's funny that like, we've all worked on different projects in our own ecosystems, but yet everyone has a utils folder. It's always the same name, utils.
Yeah.
That's funny.
There's a question from Brandon about the API routes, and I think this one might be for me because it's about hosting on Netlify. So Netlify, just to do a quick shout out, and full disclosure, I work for Netlify, so this is me doing my job. So, but we have a plugin for Next, and this plugin is designed to make everything in Next just work. Right. So this is run by Lindsay. I think she's in the chat today. And if you decide to use this, you can deploy to Netlify, and the API routes and get static paths and all this stuff that we've been doing. It'll work. It's a really nice experience, and Lindsay has done a ton of work on that. So props to her for putting the effort in.
Yeah, and I actually tried it out. I actually went through with Netlify and Vercel to do like feature comparity, comparison just to see, if anything was missing. But it actually is pretty good. Netlify hooked me up a couple weeks ago with an account, and I tried it out, and yeah, I was blown away because it works pretty well. I was shocked. I honestly didn't think Netlify was going to be able to pull it off with their infrastructure, but they did, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's been an interesting challenge, right? Because again, like when we're talking about like, why does Netlify exist? It's because we want to remove the complexity and the eventual pitfalls of complicated server setups. And as you get into the more advanced features of Next, depending on how you host it, there's the possibility that you end up with a lot of that server complexity in the areas of your app that opt into dynamic rendering. Yep. And so we were like, okay, well, how can we bridge this gap? How can we make sure that like we don't lose that functionality, but that we also don't create those pitfalls and those like potential downsides of like standing up a server again.
Right.
And so it's been a really interesting exercise there. I think there's a ton of content about it. Cassidy writes about it all the time on the Netlify blog and on Dev2 and stuff. So if you are interested in learning more, that's a whole conversation for another time. For now, let's get back to Next itself and talk about. I don't know. What should we talk about next? What else have we not looked at, or what other features do you want to dig into? And Chad, if there's something you want to see, now's the time to speak up. We got about 20 minutes left.
Yeah. So one thing I want to throw in like real quick was we didn't mention like, we've been talking about components. I mean, we've been talking about pages, but like, what about regular components?
Mm-hmm.
There are no conventions in Next.js as far as components. Typically what I see is you just make a components folder on the root, and those are your components. And Next.js won't do anything special or magical to them. They're just regular components that you can import in other components or even in your pages. The only difference between the components is that if you need to load up some, like for instance, if one of your components is using another npm component that you installed, and that component has CSS, in previous versions of Next.js, you were not able to import that npm's modules CSS. Here, you would have to import it globally, which kind of sucked because you can imagine if you had a component, I don't know, like a dropdown that was only rendered on one page on your app, you would have to import the CSS for that dropdown globally here. And that was just, not fun. So now you can actually import CSS for other npm packages inside of components and pages and things like that, which is really cool.
Nice.
And yeah, it makes things a lot better. And then also you can do CSS modules for the styling of your CSS as well inside of components.
Absolutely. CSS modules, I feel like I'm starting to think that I should talk to somebody specifically about CSS in JS, because there are 100 different ways to do it, and they all have pros and cons and trade-offs, and I every time we start to talk about it, it's like we're going to lose the whole episode if we go down this path. So I think it's time to dedicate a whole episode.
My opinion of like CSS and JS, just the thing that I've come to like the most is something that works and feels and looks like kind of like theme UI. Just being able to, basically add styles that tap into a theming system that you have built somewhere else, and you can kind of just add them a la carte on any component that you want without having to create those props yourself. They're just there. They're type checked. They just work. That's literally been the best experience for me. And you don't have to worry about them colliding because it's scoped for you and everything. Like it's been great. That's kind of what I've been doing.
Nice.
Yeah. So we talked about the component stuff. So other thing, do we have anything in chat? Let's see. Oh, TypeScript.
TypeScript and image were the ones that got asked.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about TypeScript. The good news about TypeScript is Next.js does it for you for free. You don't have to do anything. In fact, I'm trying to think, what's the most minimum thing you have to do for it to recognize? I think the most minimum thing you have to do is make a empty TS config on your root and then restart the build. I think that's all you have to do.
Dang.
Yeah, so let's try that.
That's slick. Okay, so this is going to be fun because I create a TS config, and does this need to be a .js or?
I think it's .js. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I leave it empty.
And I think it's tsconfig.js. I don't know if it's a dot file.
Oh, okay. tsconfig.js.
Yes.
All
There it
right.
is. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. Leave it empty and then just restart the build.
All right. I'm stopping, restarting. Okay, it says it's compiled.
Oh, okay. Maybe that wasn't it. Hold on.
Do I have to make
oh,
something into like a .ts file?
I don't want to give the magic away. I want to just be like, look how amazing that is. Oh, I'm sorry. It's tsconfig.json. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very, very new to the whole
No, it
TS
was me. I
config.
said .js. So yeah, let's try that again.
All right, here we go. Please install
Hey,
TypeScript.
perfect. So now it's telling me, hey, just install TypeScript and these things, and then we'll set it up for you.
Dang. Okay. All right, here we go. Doing it.
Yeah, it's pretty magical. And once you have this, I mean, all you really got to do from there is just change your extensions to whatever you want. So yeah, running the build again should hook us up.
All right, I'm running it.
Nice. So right there, detected that you have a
Dang.
TS config. It
Look at it.
populated that TS config for you with all the stuff because it's a convention-based framework, so it knows what everything is, and you're good to go. You're ready to start making TSX files if you want to.
Oof. All right. So if I come in here and let's say I'm just gonna, maybe not this one, maybe the component instead because it's much smaller. So if I rename this one to .tsx, it's now, I gotta include it properly. So I think that was in here. Do you have to prefix like this?
No, but I think maybe renaming a file might inherit a rebuild. I'm not sure if switching from JS to TSX might confuse Webpack, but
Let's
who
see.
knows? Look,
Well,
it says
actually, it looks
compiled
like it figured it out. Let's see if it did it.
Yeah.
So when I reload, let's go to the home page. It is smart enough to figure that out, and it's got my footer in there. So that actually kind of blows me away that we were able to just rename files and nothing exploded.
Yeah.
And so then in here, I have access to my types, which I
Yep.
honestly. So what do? I do like a component.
I think for the functional ones, the one you want to import from React would be FC, capital F, capital C from React, and that would be the one that you want. Yeah.
Is this right? I don't know. I like legit
Just
don't know.
wrap it in a bracket. Wrap FC in a bracket. Yep. Named import. There you go. And then yeah, now you got a functional component. And
Element is not assignable to type FC.
yeah, it's just saying FC takes a generic, so you have to pass in like those less than, greater than brackets after FC, and then pass in an object. You just put an empty object because you don't have any props. Yeah. So what is it saying now? Type element is not assigned.
I think it wants me to call it an element. Element provides no match for the signature props children React node.
Oh, I think it's because in TypeScript, what we're doing is actually we're declaring the return value by putting the FC there. So typically what I do is I don't do the functional declaration. I'll do an arrow function for footer instead, and then default export that arrow function.
Oh,
Right.
I got you. So you would do it like this.
Right. I'll say const footer equals this arrow function, and then underneath it, I'll default export. And I think that's actually something you have to do with Next.js anyway, is you have to have it very much like this for, I want to say, optimizing their fast reload. I think you'll have bugs if you don't do it this way. Somewhere in their docs, I want to find that for you, but they do say something like that.
Okay.
Fast refresh. Sometimes they'll even throw a warning saying, hey, you need to name your component. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to render your stuff. So yeah, then you'll do FC right here. You'll do the less than, greater than, and then you'll just do like an empty object because we don't really have any props here. And then you'll set that equal to the component below. So yeah, just take that function right there. Or just take the entire function, the value, everything after default, just take this, take that and set that equal to on the right side of line 3. So get rid of that semicolon and say equals that function. Yep, boom. And then just export, there you go, yeah.
Oh, I got it. I understand. Okay, yeah, this might be the first React TypeScript I've ever written. Oh, this is cool though. So now if I were to, let's say we wanted to add I don't know, a date, then that would be, we'll call it a string for easy math. And then we'll do like one of these and say, you know, copyright, whoops. See if I can remember all my shortcuts. Copyright, and we'll do date. Right. So then if I put this in here.
Yeah, you just got to import it. So you assign the date to the type, and now you got to import it. There you go. Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
And then if I go back to my app, is it going to tell me that I'm wrong?
Let's see. It should tell you that this takes, well, this file is not TypeScript, so it's not going to show you.
Oh, but I can do, what is it? It's.
Oh, yeah.
TS check.
TS check, yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's yelling at me about that. Okay, whatever. Then it says property date is missing in type. There we go.
Yeah. Gotta love TypeScript. So I think now it's
now that it's been renamed, it's not liking it. So we can just restart and that'll fix it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what we expected to happen, and yeah. But here we go. That's pretty slick. I'm kind of blown away here at how straightforward this actually is. That's pleasant.
It's pretty nice, yeah. So I think the other question was, we talked about images. So Next.js just released a package called Next Image, which is a component that optimizes images. It has pretty much the same API as image tag, but I think what's unique about it is that it tries to, you can configure it to map to certain well-known image providers like ImageX or Cloudinary. So when you pass parameters to it, it'll map to the parameters for that CDN and allow you to resize and crop and different things like that. And it just tries to optimize the images for you. But a lot of stuff you can kind of do on your own, but it's really, yeah, it's just their story for images. There's really not much to show about it because there's nothing visual to see about it.
Can we convert this one over and just take a look at the difference here? So like if I go to, let's go to blog 1 and then let's inspect source here. I can, once it loads, I kill it. What have I done?
I think we might have killed it somehow.
Here it goes.
Oh, there
okay.
It is. Okay.
So yeah, I think I might have just hit this API at a weak moment. So here we've got the image. It's got a source and it's got the alt. That's exactly what we wrote. So no surprises there. If we convert this over to Next Image, what would we do?
So the first thing is we want to import the image component from Next Image. Yeah.
Like that? Okay.
And then
right, that needs to be quoted.
Yeah, wrapper in a string, yeah. So, and then we just basically, wherever the image tag is being used, we'll replace that with image like that. And by default, I think that should work. We can try that.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay.
Must use width and height or layout fill.
Yeah, so if we don't know the width and height, then we can just put layout fill.
Okay. Is not configured under images in your next config. Oh, do I need to make it local or something?
Right. So I think when you pull it, this is where I was saying, when you pull it down from a CDN, so this is where you kind of get into Next.js's plugin system. And the way you do that is you make, on your root, you make a next config.js. So we can look at that. And I'm going to look up the exact thing here, so I'm not guessing. So, right. So what you do inside of here in the Next.js config, without trying to talk about all the other cool stuff you can do in here, you basically just want to export an object. So you can say module.exports.
Oh, module.exports.
Yeah, because this is going to run natively in Node.
Got it.
Yeah, so module.exports, and then you want to put a property here called images. And that's going to be an object. And then you want domains, which is going to be an array. And then you just want to add the actual, the domains of the images that you're going to be serving.
API.com. Like that?
Yeah. Yep. So that'll basically approve any images from this domain to be rendered with the image
I did it wrong.
thing.
Host name is not configured. Do I have to stop and restart when I add a next config?
Yeah. I believe when you change the next config, you gotta redo it. Yeah. It even tells you right there, hey, you changed the next config, restart your thing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
See, read the error message. Okay, so this fill is not what we want. So let's make up a width and height on it to get what we want. So I'm gonna do, we'll say a width of, I think these are all square. So I'm gonna make it a width of 300 and a height of 300. And now it's pretty much back to where we were.
Right.
And so under the hood then, what changed?
Under the hood, I don't think too much is going to change other than the fact that it's going to try to optimize how it's rendered by, I think, let me see, which one is this? Oh, so it's doing like an async loading of the actual image, which prevents it from blocking the JavaScript. And then it does a bunch of CSS to actually position it based on the width that you gave it.
Oh, and actually, here's something that's kind of interesting to look at. Let me slow down the browser a little bit, and I'll throttle this to, let's say, we'll call it good 3G. Oh, and yeah. When I load,
or encoded preview there.
Oh, 3G.
How did we ever use 3G?
Oh, come on. No, don't go
that was still
fast.
Too fast.
It was too fast. So what I'm looking for here is watch the content down here when it pops in eventually. Did you see how that for that split second when the image wasn't there, this was still where it was supposed to be?
Yep.
That's a big deal.
It is. It doesn't jump.
Yes.
Right.
And that's actually something that'll happen when you go into like your performance testing. If you're looking at your Lighthouse scores or web.dev, the content shift is actually like I think it's called cumulative layout shift is maybe how they're tagging it. But ultimately, every time your content jumps, your performance score is going to suffer. Because that's a super frustrating experience. Like the worst experience in the world is when you go to one of those websites that's covered in ads, and every time you scroll, the content jumps around the page. You can't remember where you were. Yeah. And as a result, like Google is using that as part of its scoring, which presumably means it's using it as part of its like ranking algorithm as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And not only is it a bad experience, but I mean, by doing that, by changing dimensions of, blocked based elements on the page, you're causing what's called a reflow in the browser, which is arguably one of the most expensive things you can do in a web app is to cause a reflow. If putting an image on the page causes everything beneath it to shift, and what you have beneath it is some WebGL, some animations, a big table, all that's got to shift now. And that's really expensive on the browser.
Yeah, exactly. And Brittany is asking in the chat if this is happening because of the width and height. It's happening because of the width and height, but because it's actually creating like an empty, you can see here, this is a transparent SVG. It's creating a placeholder image that occupies that space, and then it puts this image in the same position as it. And that's what this position absolute and everything is doing. Is so effectively what you're doing when you use next image is it's creating two images, but one of them is like, I am going to occupy the space where this image will be, even if the image is not loaded at all.
Exactly.
If you use layout fill, I actually don't know what layout fill does. Let's turn it back on and look at the source, because I don't have any idea.
It looks like it's trying its best to fill the entire space of the container.
Yeah, so we get a display block, goes to position absolute. This is kind of chaos, isn't it? It's like, I don't know why it does that actually. That's
I can read it here. So let's see. I think it comes down to, so there's an extra options you can pass in the Next.js or the Next config.js, which you specify device sizes that you want to render to.
Okay.
And layout fill basically just makes sure that your image is filling the layout of the device size,
Okay.
which is perfect for things like, I don't know, full background images, header images, things like that. And you want it to match the size of the viewport that you specified in the config.
Got it. Okay. So this is what I had expected was going to happen, is that this was going to do kind of the responsive, where it like figures out the aspect ratio and kind of moves to full width. But this is different than that. This is it's occupying the viewport, like the whole viewport, which is why we're getting this squish.
Yep.
And also it's overlaying the content. So I think if you're going to use layout fill, there's a little bit of extra work that you're going to have to do to make that contained, it looks like, because we'd have to do something like I don't know, let's just do some inline style. We could do a position relative, and
there's also a layout responsive.
Oh, is there? Okay, let's try that before I start hand coding things. So let's get this in here and see what responsive does. Image width.
But I think you still have to add the width and height when you do layout.
Oh, and that's how we get the aspect ratio. I get it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Height is 300. Okay. So this is what I expected to happen. So let's go back to the network. I have it disabled. I've disabled the cache. That was a good suggestion, chat. Let me start reloading. And here it comes, 3G. And I didn't see this content bounce. It would have been up here, but it didn't bounce. So that is actually exactly what we were hoping to see. So with responsive and a width and a height, it's going to contain or cover the full viewport, which is what I was hoping would happen. So this is the property I was looking for.
Yep.
And under the hood, what happens? It is doing, let's see, it's got an alt, it's got sizes, and it's got a source set. Oh yeah, so this is what we're interested in. So check this out. So now it's not just doing like an image tag. Now it's doing a bunch of work. So it's setting up sizes, it's setting a source set, and this is the part that I think is interesting. The way that this is working is it's actually sending this to like some kind of a processor, like a serverless function or a server endpoint, where it is processing this image, not just serving it. It's actually doing work.
Yeah.
This is powerful stuff. So now it's got powerful different resolutions.
Yeah, I mean, and that couldn't happen if this wasn't a full stack framework with, the ability to have APIs and stuff like that.
Yeah. This is slick. This is really slick.
Yeah, and you can get crazier with it because you can, like, when you add different domains, you can configure how the next image component interacts with those domains. You can say, hey, when I pass in these props, I want you to map them to these parameters on this domain's URL.
Oh, so cool.
Figure that.
That's super slick. Well, yeah. All right. So this is amazing. And with that, I think we're just about at time. If you've got any last second questions, chat, get them in now. In the meantime, Scott, where should someone go if they want to keep going down this path?
Oh man, there's so many resources. The documentation is actually pretty nice. I've learned a lot from their documentation. They like kind of gamified their documentation where you can kind of go through it and earn points and stuff like that, and they quiz you on it. So it's pretty good resource. If you're looking for something a little more guided, a little more hands-on project-based, I do have an intro to Next.js course on front-end masters that I shot early last year. And then I just followed up with a Next.js in production course, which takes off of that and really just builds onto a bunch of amazing things like how to use previews and revalidation and other things that we didn't talk about today, like server-side props and different things like that. So you can check that one out. I think they're still editing it and it should be published really soon if it's not there already. But I think those are good resources. There's also, honestly, if you go watch the conferences, the Next.js conferences, and look at some of the talks, there's some really good material there. I learned a lot of stuff from there, like what's coming next. No pun intended. But like, what's coming next. The creators of Next.js, what they're thinking about the framework, better examples of how to use some of the features that they just made and why they're doing it. So those are pretty much the resources that I follow.
Nice. I think there's a playlist that has all of those videos on it. I think, was this it? Nope.
That was something else.
Next.js Conf playlists, I think, is what we're after. That's a different conference. Okay. If somebody finds this and has a link, I see Cassidy. I think if you know the list that these videos are on, I know that you were just looking at this a little bit ago, and I can put those in the resources for this episode. And with that, let's also remember, go follow Scott on Twitter for more information. And I'm not saying this because we're pandering. I'm saying this because it's true. Go watch these front end masters courses. They are outstanding. And the front end masters content is just very good all around. So you're going to get a lot of great information there. I think from there, let's do one more shout out to the sponsors. Remember, we've had live captioning going all episode, and that is through White Coat Captioning. Thank you very much for that. The captioning is made possible by Netlify, Fauna, Auth0, and Hasura, who all sponsor this show to make it more accessible to more people. Scott, I had so much fun today. I learned so much today. Thank you so much for being here. Any parting words for the chat?
I saw a couple minutes ago, someone asked me what switches I was using for my keyboard. So I wanted to make sure I answer that because I'm a keyboard enthusiast, and I actually, I built keyboards. So I built this one from scratch.
Oh, nice.
Which is super, super nice. So the switches that I have for this one is actually from a company called Zeal PC. And the switches are linear, and they're called the Telio V2 switches linear. They're very smooth. I didn't have to actually lube them or anything. They kind of just work very well out of the box if you like a linear switch. So check them out. Only thing I have to say, if you're going to use Next.js, if you're going to use Gatsby, if you're going to do anything like that, I highly recommend using some type of content management system. It really doesn't matter which one you use. There's tons of them out there. They all cater to your different needs. But if you look at the features that these frameworks have, they're enabling you to actually use a CMS. We looked at Git Static Props. We looked at Git Static Paths. That's perfect to be able to go fetch some content from a CMS, right? That your non-technical coworkers created. So I'm really trying to get to the point where the community no longer hard codes content ever again, just like you would never hard code users' data. I mean, it's impossible. You couldn't recreate Twitter and hard code every user's data. Like, that's impossible. You have to make an API call. Content should be the same way because at the end of the day, content is users' data. It's just that the users are the people on your team. It's still data though. Yeah. So don't hard code it.
Yeah. And if you're looking for a suggestion, remember, Scott runs Type.
Yeah, check out Type. We're actually going to be releasing out of private beta probably the next week or so. So
okay. All right. Maybe we got to come back and do another episode on that.
A lot of hard work went into Type. We partnered very closely with Next.js and Vercel to get a really tight integration that I haven't seen on any other CMSs. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Slick. Really, really looking forward to that. Chat, make sure you go check out the schedule because we've got so much good stuff coming up. Next week, we're going to have Ben Hong come on and teach us Views Composition API. I am so excited for that. Sarah Drasner's coming back later in the week, and she's going to talk to us about how she is looking for people to hire, what stands out to her, and what she's kind of aiming for when she's putting job offers or requisitions out there, and what you can do to help yourself stand out in the field. And this is going to be more of a Q&A, so this is definitely one to be here for live. It'll be useful if you watch it in the replay, but you're going to get the most out of it if you watch live, so don't forget to show up. We're going to get into building your own Babel plugin. We are going to use WordPress with Next.js. We've got so much amazing stuff coming up. Make sure you mark your calendars. And remember, if you click this button, it's going to show up on your Google Calendar so that you are able to get those notices. You can also follow on Twitch if you want mobile notifications whenever I go live. I think that's it for us this week. Scott, thank you again so much for taking the time to teach us Next today. I had an absolute blast. Chat, as always, thank you so much for hanging out. Stay tuned. We're going to go find somebody to raid. We will see you next time.
All right. Take care, everybody.